Hi, I'm Blaze from SynthMorph. Today I will show you some really interesting tricks to use your access virus more effectively. They all relate to any kind of access viruses, including the TI series. I'm just demonstrating on the PowerCore version because it's easier to record on screen. Do not forget, most of these tips can even be applied to other synths as well. I'm using the init patch just to demonstrate these sound tweaks the simplest way, so you can focus on what really makes those changes, but sometimes we'll switch to the pre-saved presets to save time. At the bottom of the article you can download all the 10 simple presets to study them further. Now it's credit time. Some of these tips are from the great virus programming tutorial written by synth expert Howard Scarr, but it is much easier to explain in video than reading, so let's dive in. Tip number 1. Listen to oscillator free in isolation. When you are tweaking a sound, you will always hear the oscillator 1 or 2 or both. You can only set the balance between them. Whenever you enable the oscillator free, you cannot hear it in isolation as the main oscillator volume knob affects all the free oscillators. Fortunately, you can apply a little trick which allows to hear the oscillator free in isolation, which is just 3 simple turns of knobs. First, set the oscillator 1 to balance fully to the left. So now we are hearing only oscillator 1 default ramp, the upward saw sound. Now turn oscillator 1 shape to the right. It changes oscillator 1 to the full square waveform. Then turn also the pulse width to the right. As you hear, at maximum setting, the square is essentially muted. Now all you have to make is a selection from the oscillator free waveforms and set its volume, and voila, you get the isolated os-free sound. Tip number 2. Distortion. In any virus, including the TI, you have essentially 2 kinds of distortion, and let me show you a diagram here. The first one is the filter saturation, and there are 2 important things here to remember, which never changes. Filter saturation is always after filter 1. See this diagram here. Just look at the possible filter configurations, the serial ones, the parallel or the split. The saturation is always the last one in the filter 1 chain. It is fixed and it cannot be changed. The other thing about the saturation that it is always per voice, meaning it separately affects each pressed notes. If I'm selecting something like the shaper and set to maximum here, and when I play and hold more notes, each note is saturated separately. Now if you play a chord, it doesn't get messed up. The overall sound stays relatively clean, only the single sounds are saturated. One more important thing here, the ost volume is important in saturation because it sets the volume up to 0, and after 0 it always adjusts the saturation intensity or character, so not the volume anymore. Fortunately, this is not all, as we also have the global patch distortion per part that affects all played sounds simultaneously. Well, the real grunge is really coming from this one, or even better, combine the filter saturation with this global distortion. I especially like here the rectifier as it has a very strong filthy character. First I play each note separately here. Remember, it's just a single saw waveform, nothing special. Now watch what happens when I play and hold more and more notes. Great distortion is coming out now. Now remove the filter saturation. Yeah, this one is still very simple but crazy. Tip 3. Additional hidden gain. When you create a more complex patch, the internal gain management will try to avoid distortion, so it always decreases the overall volume level. Sometimes it can be too quiet, even at maximum patch volume. Now you could increase gain by, for instance, applying some ring modulation, but obviously it is not the right choice, as it strongly changes the character of the patch, so we need something neutral for this case. Okay, here is the trick. Here's a mono lead, and let's assume I'm playing it live, not using in the studio. As in the studio you can increase the gain in several easier ways. So a special setting of the chorus effect will do the job here. If you want to boost the level of the patch, then first find the chorus settings. You should increase the feedback to around 2 o'clock, then gradually increase the mix settings of the chorus until it's fine. It's great because at rate depth and delay time all set to 0, it's not changing the stereo image at all, just increases the apparent sound level. Tip number 4, recursive modulation. Let's talk a bit about the envelopes of the virus. It has 2 identical ADSTR envelopes, one for the filter and one for sound level. If you check the attack of the sounds, it is always linear, but can you change this shape? Okay, let's see an example. Here I'm setting the amplifier attack and play. And you see, it's a perfect linear attack. Now the question is, can we somehow mimic the different attack behaviors of other analog synths? Yes, it's absolutely possible in Virus by using the so-called recursive modulation. It sounds a bit serious, but don't worry. All you have to remember that this recursive means something that affects itself. And we'll show you examples in a minute. But for now, just remember that recursive modulation here means that the amp envelope globally affects the amplifier attack, or the filter envelope affects the filter attack. In Virus, we always have to set these type of connections in the modulation matrix. In the source list, we have to select any of these 2 envelopes and the 3 LFOs. All the rest, like the pitch bend, mod wheel, foot pedals, and so on, are all external modulators that cannot affect themselves because you can target only internal sound parameters. Okay, now I'm loading this patch called 04 Recursive. It's just a slightly modified init patch. Okay, and I set here the attack to 83, set the filter attack to 83, amp of attack, okay. Okay, nothing changes as the amount is still 0. The more you increase the modulation, the more the envelope will recurse and self-modulate, creating these concave or convex envelopes. So if you see, if I'm setting it to +20, it's getting increasing concave. Minus 21, it becomes increasing convex. Another example, and the reset to 0 for recursive, reset amount. Okay, now the filter envelope modulates the filter envelope attack. I don't touch the filter attack directly here. It is set to kind of middle value, and now I only change the amount of modulation, and it strongly manipulates the attack phase of the sound. As a general rule, anytime you modulate the amp or filter attack with the amplifier or the filter envelope, with positive modulation amount you get an increasing concave, and with negative modulation amount you get an increasing convex attack. You may try this recursive modulation not just with the attack, but also with different segments of ADSR like the decay or release. So overall, despite its simple look, the virus envelope can be very flexible. Also remember that you can use the recursive modulation using the LFO123, modulating for example its own LFO rate or LFO contour to create even more grainy and unpredictable modulations, which is I think second to none in virus. Tip number 5. Oscillator 1 detune. If you look at the oscillator section of the virus, you will see that there are detune knobs for oscillator 2 and oscillator 3, but there isn't one for oscillator 1. It's a very strange method also from the virus tutorial booklet, and even the author admits that he doesn't know why it works, but it works. It's very simple. In the LFO1 section, select the destination LFO1 to oscillator 1 pitch and set the LFO waveform to square. Now, increasing or decreasing the amount, we get a nice steady detune of oscillator 1. Tip number 6. Multiplied modulations. Sometimes you may want to create stronger modulations that happen within a smaller range of any controller. I set to 06 the multimod preset. I will show you an example using the key follow, but it works for any other controller. So what is key follow? The key follow is a kind of modulator where positive values will cause the cutoff frequency to increase as I play the keyboard to the upper side. After playing 2 octaves, the higher register is still too dark for me. I would like to make more variations in the sound using the filter only. Let's see how to achieve it. I'm going to our favorite modulation matrix and set the key follow to filter 1 cutoff. So this is essentially the same as here on the filter page. I modulated, increased the cutoff by the plate node position. The higher I play, the more the filter opens. Now what you hear is that through multiple octaves the filter just opens a bit, and it is still very dark at that high register. When I enable the multiple key follow modulations, modulating the same destination, the filter, multiple times, multiplies the changes, making the effect much stronger. So now the filter is fully opened within an octave range, if that's what you want. What's great that you can use this method to emphasize nearly any kind of modulations. Tip number 7, infinite rhythmic patterns using just an LFO. Okay, I'm loading this 07 rhythmic LFO patch. I set the LFO 1 to modulate the main patch volume with negative amount. LFO 1 I select a quarter clock for the pulsation, now it automatically syncs to the host tempo. With the saw you can make the usual simulations of the sidechain effect. But hey, it's a virus, so there is much more inside. Let's select another LFO, wave shapes from the list, and zoom into the symmetry. On the hardware virus it is called contour. By turning it always to the left to slightly change the LFO waveforms. As we shift the symmetry, the rhythmic patterns move accordingly. Just imagine how much variation it allows you to create some really organic modulations. Tip number 8, the hidden arpeggiator. So, did you know that Virus has a hidden arpeggiator? Okay, not really. It's a very simple thing, you cannot control it particularly, but sounds like a very basic random arpeggiator. Okay, but where is it? It's a special setting of the chorus effect. The key is to select the chorus shape to sample and hold, set the rate to higher value, and both the depth and the delay time to around its maximum value. Finally adjust the chorus mix to around half setting. So this is how it sounds. With the rate you set the speed, and depth has also an audible effect. Okay, just experiment. Tip number 9. Simulating the delay without a delay. Well, it's a well-known thing. I'm loading this 09 delay simulator. So just using the hardware setting of the LFO1 and LFO2, LFO1 modulates the filter gain at about this value. LFO2 affects the frequency modulation amount, and LFO1 1/8 note clogged, so waveform. LFO2 is set to quarter note clogged, again as so. And now if you want that each voice has its own delay, then leave the LFO mode on poly. But you can reduce the possible chaos by setting the LFO mode to mono. And finally I set the unison to twin to make this sound somewhat wider. Also, change the LFO waveform to create rhythmic variations. Tip number 10. Simulate separate attack and release sounds. Most musical sounds work fine with only 2 oscillators, so we can utilize the third oscillator just to create something interesting. A separate attack. Here are the steps to create the attack. I start from the init patch. First, I set the oscillator 3 to any wave and use a semitone setting that's quite different from the overall pitch of the oscillator 1 and 2. So let's transpose it to +24 semitone. In the mixer section, set oscillator 3 volume to 0. In any LFO, set the LFO wave shape to so and rate around like 81. Let's change the LFO to one-shot envelope mode. Now assign the destination to oscillator 3 volume. Set the assign amount full to the right. Fine-tune the length of the attack with the rate. Faster the rate, the shorter the attack. Okay, that's about the attack. Now let's see the release and what are the steps to create a release sound when we release a note. To make it work, we have to use one of the virus filter. I'm using filter 1 here, so set the filter balance full to the left. I set the filter 1 cutoff around 100, envelope amount to maximum. Set the filter envelope and sustain to the max and release 0. Nothing can be heard yet. The first important thing to achieve the release effect, set the filter 1 envelope polarity to inverse. We are a bit closer now. And the second important point is to set the right ratio between the release of the amplifier and filter envelope. The filter release has to be much shorter than the amplifier release. Now experiment by fine-tuning the following parameters. I especially like to decrease the envelope amount when playing chords to get an instant vintage vibe. Or try to increase the filter envelope release from 0 to a higher value to produce a nicely faded release sound instead of the abrupt release. So this was the 10 tricks, thanks for watching, and please let me know how you liked it in the comments below. If you liked it, subscribe to my YouTube channel for more synth related stuff or just visit my website at synthmorph.com. Have a great day.